The UAE's crown prince touches down in Turkey. They were rivals for years, but Ankara and Abu Dhabi are now looking toward the future together. Could this new relationship revitalize the region? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the Erdogan-MBZ summit. Well, it's been almost 10 years since Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and UAE Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan met face to face. But on Wednesday, the two left rivalries aside to discuss possible new partnerships. Over the past few years especially, the relationship has been strained, with the two finding themselves on opposite ends of various geopolitical struggles. In Libya, they backed opposing sides in the civil war. And President Erdogan threatened to suspend diplomatic ties after the UAE signed the Abraham Accords to normalize relations with Israel. But the frost now seems to be thawing. Earlier this year, the Turkish president met with the UAE's national security advisor. Following the meeting, President Erdogan spoke of his desire for further cooperation.
After this, I hope we will have a meeting with MBZ. We are in favor of the main actors in the region directly negotiating and solving the problems.
And soon after that meeting, Erdogan spoke to the Crown Prince over the phone. Following the call, Anwar Gargash, a senior advisor to MBZ, said the discussion had been positive and friendly. And since then, there's been even more progress. The two nations held a joint business conference in Dubai, and Turkey's trade minister spoke of how Ankara and Abu Dhabi stand to benefit.
The forum is an opportunity for businesses to collaborate, learn more about each other's industries, and develop new areas of cooperation. I fully believe that this event will open a new chapter in our relations and take the positive dialogue between us a step further. It is in both our interests to develop and deepen the commercial and economic relations between Turkey and the UAE, relations that have significant regional potential.
And in another sign that relations are heading in the right direction, the UAE's Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology said it was time to take economic cooperation to the next level.
And I look forward to expanding on these partnerships in various fields and across various industries. We are taking a comprehensive approach to this partnership. We will build on the existing foundation between the two countries and enhance our economic, trade, and social ties across multiple sectors. And this, of course, includes energy, healthcare, food, agriculture, logistics, ports, transportation, industry, manufacturing, infrastructure, financial and capital markets, technology, tourism, culture, and many more. We also aim to forge partnerships to address global challenges like climate change, energy, food and water security.
So it sounds like the sky's the limit for an economic partnership, but when might we see that change manifest, given what needs to be reconciled on other fronts? Well, joining me now to discuss that from Ankara is defense and security analyst Yusuf Alabarda. Marwan Kabalan is the Director of Policy Analysis at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies in Doha. And from Istanbul is political analyst and author Onur Erim. Thanks all so much for being with us. Greatly appreciated. So in summation, it looks like Turkey and the UAE want to move from a geopolitically driven, kind of adversarial foreign policy to one driven primarily by the economy and mutual benefits. Onur Erim, is that the right strategy? And if so, how much is there to gain?
I think so. And really, after years of not so many great ages or times of relationship with Turkey and the countries in the Gulf region, even in North Africa, I think there's anything and everything but everything to gain from this point on. I think the future is looking very bright. What we have to realize, or what we have to, I guess, relay well, is that the mutually beneficial relationship where there's a win-win situation for everybody, not just on a bilateral point, but on a multilateral point covering all the countries in the region is a key issue at this point. I think once we set this path, we will see nothing but mutually beneficial outcomes for everybody, not just between Turkey and UAE, but also all the countries in the region. So I hope this is a restart of a great relationship where every country helps each other in the ways that the other countries lack. Turkey has a lot to offer to the region. The region has a lot to offer to Turkey, for as long as they could find a mutually beneficial way to make sure that everybody comes out with a win out of this equation.
Okay, let me ask Yusuf if you are equally optimistic. I mean, could this be a win for really all sides in not just the bilateral, but the regional equation here?
To some degree, yes, but I do not think that all the problems and tensions in between UAE and Turkey will resolve in one meeting. So I do not think that everything will be resolved with this meeting. But I believe that this is a turning point in between the EU, United Arab Emirates, and Turkey, especially in relations between Libya and United Arab Emirates and Turkey. And might be another surprising point might come from the Syrian relations in between Turkey and Syria, because as far as I know, that United Arab Emirates also had close ties since from a couple of weeks between Syria and United Arab Emirates. That may also improve the relations in between Turkey and Syria. For that reason, I do agree with Mr. Onur's statements that it might bring also different countries to come to a conclusion on a win-win basis.
Okay, but tell me quickly what actually worries you the most. What could hold them back on full reconciliation?
From my point of perspective, one of the worst things that can obstacle the relations might come from the relations between the terror groups, and United Arab Emirates has ties in Somalia, in Syria, and the FETÖ terror organizations. If those relations keeps going on, probably that will not improve. But if those issues can be resolved, I do believe that Turkey and United Arab Emirates might start from that point as a turning point.
Okay, let me ask Marwan, how optimistic are you? I mean, are your concerns the same as what Yusuf just highlighted?
Well, I think it looks like the two countries are starting like a new era in the relationship between them. As my colleagues actually said, the two countries were involved in a proxy conflicts over the past decade since the start of the Arab Spring in 2011. They have been taking different sides in Libya, in Syria, in the East Mediterranean, in the Horn of Africa. I think now the two countries are taking more pragmatic approach, and the reasons for me are both domestic and external. We all know that the United Arab Emirates started to take a no problem, no enemies approach since actually the election of Joe Biden, and more specifically after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, where the United Arab Emirates discovered for a sudden that the United States might not be that trusted ally anymore, because they left their allies in Afghanistan very much betrayed. So I think they started to think of a new foreign policy in which they started to open up to old rivals like Turkey, for example, Iran as well, Syria as well, because the United Arab Emirates foreign minister was visiting actually Bashar al-Assad in Damascus last week. This is something that we can say that the Emiratis are starting to think of more like in geopolitical interest rather than geostrategic, or geoeconomic interest rather than geopolitical interest, and that is also suits Turkey very much, I believe, because Turkey also is having like a new approach towards the region, in which Turkey started also to open up to other countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and now the United Arab Emirates. I believe everybody now is interested in lowering the tension, which has actually damaged their interest over the past decade. Of course, we all admit that there are limitations, but there is determination, we believe, on the sides of almost everybody to solve these regional problems and rely more on themselves for security and start some sort of more economic approach rather than political approach. Although I must say that the relationship, the economic relationship between the United Arab Emirates and Turkey has not been really affected by the political differences between the two countries. The United Arab Emirates actually is one of the largest partner of Turkey in the region, and it's the third largest recipient of Turkish weapons. Surprise, surprise. So I think that the relationship is now set to develop perhaps more on this front. But the good news for all of us here is now we are going to see less tension between the two countries, less political differences, and more focus on economic interests.
Yeah, I want to really talk about the economy in a little bit more detail. But first, I want to go back to something, Marwan, that you said about having seen many of the parties in the region really damage their own self-interest because of these strained relationships over the past few years. Onur, tell us what you think was actually lost, especially with Turkey and the UAE being so much at odds rather than trying to reconcile over the past 5, 6, 7 years in particular.
I think I would best sum it up with, and I will not really go into who to blame on this more, but the minute that countries of this region start to talk via others that are out of the region, whether this be Russia, whether this be USA, whether this be any country in the EU, that's when we'll start having problems. And that is, I believe, the source and the base of all the problems that we've been having within the region in the last almost a decade. The time that we let Europeans, or the time that we let Russians, or the time that we let the Americans become intermediary between the countries within this region, that's when we start having problems. This has started more than 100 years ago, and every time we let this happen, the countries of this region will face the same catastrophes, maybe in different ways. First World War, Second World War, it may have been different. We faced these problems in different ways, and now we're facing it differently. But the root and the base of the problem hasn't changed in the last 100, 150 years. And in the future, and I hope this doesn't happen, but every time we let the others out of the region intervene of the relationship within this region, we're going to face the same problem over and over.
So just quickly, Onur, do you think having kind of Trump out of the equation has been beneficial? Has that pushed regional neighbors now to be more proactive in mending their own ties?
I don't know if it's Trump being out of the picture that is,
well, he devised the Abraham Accords, which did, throw quite a spanner in the works for some.
I understand. But I don't know if it's really him being omitted out of the picture is really kind of resolving some issues, or from my perspective, lack of intervention by the current sitting president Biden of the region that is really letting things get back to some stage of normalization. Definitely, what Trump has done in the region has really pulled, unfortunately, a lot of bad strings. Of course, him being out of the picture is playing a big role, letting things get back to normal. But also, I would really attest a lot of this to Biden's inability to really be a player in the region, whether by his own choice or not is a different story. That letting people actually start communicating again. At least right now, we're seeing at the worst case scenario, a good communication, a direct communication, which I presume will actually solve many of the misunderstandings. Now, as Mr. Alabarda said, let's not expect a world out of this meeting. not everything will be resolved. Maybe nothing will be resolved at this meeting, but at least we have some kind of a line of communication open.
And there's
we
some
have
momentum.
Contact.
Undeniable momentum, I think.
This is going to lead to something much better than what we had in the last 6-7 years.
Okay.
Let's keep our hopes high.
Okay. Let me ask Yusuf quickly. You know, there so much of the U.S. foreign policy, I mean, particularly under Trump, was based on isolating, containing, if you will, Iran. So much of it was how to strategize against Tehran as a power in the region. So let me ask you if you think this new relationship developing and its potential between the UAE and Turkey, does it bode well for Iran or not?
I do not think that it is good for Iran, and from the perspective of the United Arab Emirates, of course, that is good, the Biden administration's policies for Iran, but that does not mean it is the same good for the United Arab Emirates, especially when my counterpart expressed very clearly when United States left Afghanistan, United Arab Emirates has understood that he might stay in the region alone against Iran. And for this reason, being an ally with Turkey and developing the relations with Turkey probably will give to the United Arab Emirates also a chance to resist to the regional power of Iran. United Arab Emirates has seen this. We didn't come to this point by chance. You know that there was a very aggressive foreign policy imposed by the Emiratis. But at the end, they have realized the limits of their power, especially after the Biden administration put some data and also very close to the agreement with the Iran. All of a sudden, United Arab Emirates has understood the limits of its power. And also, they have understood that the blockade and embargo imposed to Qatar came to a conclusion. And the second issue, they couldn't achieve the things, the military coup inside Libya by Khalifa Haftar. You know that United Arab Emirates has hired Wagner and some soldiers from Sudan and Chad, and also financially helped a lot to Khalifa Haftar. But at the end of the day, he understood that without Turkey, it will not be possible to come to a conclusion. So we didn't come to this turning point by chance. For this reason, at this point, there can be really a win-win position and turning point for both Turkey and United Arab Emirates.
Right. It'll be very interesting to see what comes out of Libya if this, what is supposed to be an upcoming election, is actually held and what develops from that. But Marwan, if I can come back to you, because I did want to address the very important economic issues and what this visit could mean economically, particularly for Turkey. Abu Dhabi has one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. Turkey would obviously like to get some of that investment. Where and what would the UAE be most interested in? I mean, you mentioned the relationship in arms trade and exports to the UAE from Turkey, but what are the other industries really that the UAE thinks could be of its interest for its sovereign wealth?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, the United Arab Emirates now is adopting this approach of no enemies, no problems in the region, especially after the departure of President Trump, which I believe he was the trigger. Actually, his departure was the trigger to this realignment in the region. And I'm expecting a high-ranking Emirati officials visiting Tehran in the coming few days or weeks, perhaps. But going back to your question about the economic interests of the United Arab Emirates, I believe they are now really interested in more in this aspect of their relationship, their regional relationship, and their foreign policy. And I believe Turkey presents a very good opportunity for them. As you said, they have the largest sovereign fund in the region, more than something like 700 billion plus dollars. And they are looking for places and destinations to invest. And Turkey, as I said, is one of the best, especially now. They believe that there is a good opportunity actually to invest in the Turkish economy, in transportation, in the infrastructure, in communication, in the defense industry. And it's really interesting to see how the United Arab Emirates is interested in the defense industry of Turkey. They would very much like to buy shares in the drone industry in Turkey. We all know that Turkish drones have proved to be very effective in Syria, in Azerbaijan, in Nagorno-Karabakh, the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and also in Libya. And everybody seems to be interested actually in buying these drones, including, of course, Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Ethiopia. Almost everybody is interested now in the defense industry, which proved to be which have developed actually a lot over the past few years. So I believe now the United Arab Emirates is looking for these sectors. In fact, but as I said earlier, the United Arab Emirates and Turkey, they are very pragmatic. They have very pragmatic foreign policy. Although their political differences were huge over the past few years, their economic ties were developing. And we noticed, for example, that in 2017, whereas the trade balance between the two countries was $7 billion, in 2019, it jumped into $9 billion. And the United Arab Emirates would like actually to have it over the past couple of years to reach as big as $30 billion. So I believe there are huge potentials for the both countries. To develop their economic relations, and it's beneficial for both of them. In fact, Turkey needs more investment from the outside, and the United Arab Emirates, they have the money actually to invest, and they are looking for lucrative deals, and Turkey presents one of them.
Right. So, Onur, Turkey would like to see its economy strengthened, particularly at this time. So how much is riding really on this meeting and this relationship in that sense alone?
I think if you took this as an individual act, yes, this is a very important development that could lead into other things. But I think at this point in time, this would really be a very psychological boost for the Turkish investment possibilities all around the world. Now, everybody, of course, has their eye on with such a great size of their wealth fund to where UAE would invest. So by itself, of course, it would be a sizable matter for the direct investment in Turkey. But I think the fame that it would bring at this point of the Turkish investment market that is seeking much international funds, it would be a great psychological boost, and it would be a very good marketing tool as well. So let's not think of it just as investment of X amount of dollars from UAE, but let's also consider what it would bring in the international, picture for pulling investments, direct investments, especially to Turkey. I think that would really mean a lot.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Yusuf, we only have 2 minutes, actually less than 2 minutes left. And I asked you earlier what you fear the most, what worries you the most. Let me finish then asking you what your ideal outcome would be for this meeting. Where would you see the synergies really work in both interests, the region? Outline that for us.
Okay, this will be a starting point. What is the optimistic side from my point of perspective? If those two countries may come to a conclusion for win-win issues, one of the most positive sides will be effective without no doubt in Libya. The second issue, the investment part, Turkey is one of the most lucrative country for anyone who wants to invest. For that reason, for the energy sector, for defense sector, for highways, for railways, there are lots of area that United Arab Emirates can invest, which also Turkey will enjoy from these investments.
Okay, and Marwan, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think conflict between the two countries has benefited nobody over the past 10 years. Let's hope that cooperation will produce actually something more beneficial for both of them. And for the whole region, because we have had enough actually of conflicts and wars in this part of the world, and maybe it's time to start reconciliation between these different key players.
Let's hope. Okay, Marwan, I will let you have the last word. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists really so much for being with us on fascinating discussion on the Newsmakers, and thanks to our viewers, of course, for being with us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at @the_Newsmakers, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.